What's up, knife freaks, sharpness geeks, and purveyors of stabby goodness? Welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name is Jonathan McNeese, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Mr. Tyler Davis from Cajun Gun and Gear.
How's it going?
Good, man. How are you today?
Oh, doing great, man. Like I was telling you, recovering from a Disney trip and trying to get my head back on straight.
That takes at least a week minimum to recover from that, I know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's always a good time going down there, but we used to go a lot when the kids were young, and man, it was fun, but you needed a vacation when you got done.
Yeah, this is our second time down there. My oldest is 14, and I got 9-year-old twins. So it was a different trip than the
Yeah,
previous one we went on. A little bit easier, a little less stress on me, a little more fun with them this time. But
there you go.
yeah, I got to let my pocketbook recover for a little while now.
Yeah, yeah, that always takes a hit for sure there. Yeah, I mean, you're only paying like what, $10 nearly for a Coke or something like that. And last time we went, it was pretty insane.
Pretty close to
So
it. Yep.
yeah, when people think knives are expensive, that's what, y'all ain't never been to Disney.
That's right.
So, well, that's awesome. Well, speaking of making money and helping you pocketbook, so the reason that we know Tyler, he's one of our good dealers. So I'm gonna let him fill you in on the whole background of it, but he basically has you got multiple locations of the gun stores, right?
Right,
How
right.
many locations do you have?
So we have two physical locations and then our online sites as well.
Yeah,
Um, the hub where I kind of started all this is in Lafayette, Louisiana, down in Cajun country, about an hour and a half out of New Orleans. And then about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, we opened one over in Katy, Texas, which is on the other side of Houston. That market, we are looking for a second place to open up, and in our immediate area, had a little trouble finding a good spot, so we just kept pushing
uh,
out and pushing out until we found a space where we knew there was some opportunity. And Houston folks, especially on the gun side, man, they love their guns, so it was an
yeah,
easy fit over there. So, but yeah,
yeah.
doing good on both locations for sure.
Very good, very good. And then you push into like kind of more into the higher end. Most gun stores have at least some knives, but the push kind of into more of the actual knife world, I guess you'd say. That's
Yep.
fairly recent, is that right?
Yeah, it really is. So, if let me give you a little backstory. I used to be in finance a
Hmm.
million years ago, and got into this kind of as a hobby, both on the knife side and the gun side, as just a hobbyist myself.
Yeah.
2013, I started teaching the concealed carry classes. I was teaching attorneys and realtors and all these people, and was enjoying it. So I decided to get my FFL license. And for the first couple of years, we were more online than anything else. At the time, I was doing a lot with different forums and online stuff. And so I still worked part time at the bank. I kind of called it my mullet. I had the banking office in the front and the guns in the front and the back. Um, at the time, I kind of pivoted a little bit away from knives just to kind of focus in on how do I build a business, right? And
Hmm.
and I saw an easier path there. We did a lot with some of the higher end, like Wilson Combat, Nighthawk Custom, different guys like that. A lot of 1911s, 2011s weren't really that big a deal at the time, but the 1911s were, at least for me. And so, kind of built a presence online and established ourselves there. And then as we continued to grow, found the need to do a retail store.
Hmm.
Um, Ended up opening the Lafayette store. But yeah, so we kind of backed into having a retail store by having that online store.
Okay.
And then at the time we did that, it was a couple of years before COVID, and then COVID came along, and you couldn't keep any inventory in stock. I mean, it was in and
Yeah.
out the building as fast as we could. So I guess it's been maybe 2 years ago. I said, I always enjoyed knives personally. It was always a hobby of mine, and I said it's time to start integrating that back into the store in a bigger way.
Yeah.
Instead of just carrying it kind of as a basic accessory, let's push and let's find our customer base there. And um, over time, I think it was January actually of last year, I spun the knife side off onto its own website because SEO in the gun world is like a four-letter word, man. You can't you
Yeah.
can't advertise much of anything. Not that knives are super friendly to the, to the tech and stuff. But there was a little more room there for me at least to try to grow that as its own thing. So we have the two stores that they have Cajun Gun and Gear at both locations, and then we have Cajun Knife and Gear at both locations. Kind of a dedicated area in
Mm.
each shop to specifically knife selection. And the intention is there's a lot of guys at both locations that they don't get a chance to put their hands on these knives until basically
Right.
they pay the bill, get it in the mail, and decide whether or not they like it. And
Yeah.
so we try to leverage that and say, look, brick and mortar here, Louisiana, I don't have as many customers as I do, or people, I'd say, as I do in Houston. But we have a lot of guys who really like that kind of custom, higher end stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's become a draw. We got another big knife retailer in North Louisiana, but for our area, we get guys coming in from New Orleans and from Baton Rouge and these other big cities because they just don't see the selection that we have. And the problem is I'm an addict myself when it comes to collecting, and so I end up just filling the cases up with stuff I like, and then the
Yeah.
guys will pick on me because I'll get something in and I'll put it in the back, and a couple of weeks go by and they say, "Look, you gonna sell this? You gonna keep it? You gotta get off the pot here and do something with it."
Yeah.
But it's fun because at least I get to enjoy it. It's not just a job. While it does have those aspects, it's definitely, at least at the end of the day, I can enjoy what I'm doing. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, you know, people say, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I don't think that's totally true. Um, but it definitely helps. It definitely helps. And
yeah,
when you're getting to work with stuff that you like, cool stuff or whatever, I mean, there's still problems, there's still headaches to deal with, but when it comes down to it, you can always take a minute, take a breath and be like, oh, I got this fire to put out and this fire to put out and this fire to put out. But like for us, it's like, but I'm making knives for a living. Like, how freaking cool is
right.
that? And for you,
Yep.
it's you're selling guns and knives like that. I mean, when it comes right down to it, how bad can it actually be? I mean, you're getting to do something really cool for a living. So like, it's got its
Yep.
stresses, but it always can give you that perspective shift. Okay, as bad as all this is, I could be selling toilet seats or something. Like
Exactly. Yeah. Both UPS and FedEx usually get here it's usually about 3:30 in the afternoon. And
hmm
so usually by that point in the day, I got caught up in something, stressed out over something, dealing with, the bookkeeper, or dealing with this, or the website isn't working, or, somebody has an
yeah,
issue we got to fix. So then finally the stuff gets here and you're like, all right, okay, let's just go see what's in the boxes. It's like Christmas every day. Even if I don't get to keep it, I at least get to
yeah,
break them open and see what's happening. So yeah,
yeah,
that kind of makes it, take some of that stress back away.
yeah. I've never really thought about it like this, but kind of probably for you, maybe even more than us. 'Cause, I mean, obviously we like making stuff, but then we basically only handle primarily our stuff, which I'm not complaining about that. But for you, you get to handle all kinds of stuff, so it's kind of like almost like you get the benefit of collecting without the guilt because you're not technically keeping them, but you get to pass them through your hands. They get to be there for a while. And hopefully not too long. I know you want to sell them,
That's
but
right.
like they get to you get to handle them. You get to you get to check them out or whatever. And then occasionally I'm sure one finds its way into your pocket or something. But you get to handle a whole lot more knives and temporarily own them or whatever before you move them along. And so you kind of get a lot of the benefits of collecting without the guilt that goes along with emptying out your bank accounts. So
Yeah, it does get to where you get a little more picky into what you take home because you do get to pass a lot of things through your hands. But
yeah,
yeah, I used to joke, and my wife is very supportive of the business. But I used to joke, it's like, man, I opened a gun shop because she got tired of me bringing stuff home and saying, where the heck did this come from? So it's the
yeah,
gun shops now.
yeah. There you go.
So same thing with the knives. It's, oh no, that's just a demo knife. That's just passing through my hands.
That's right. Well, and there's always from the probably better tread lightly here, but from Uncle Sam's perspective, it's our business, guns and knives or whatever, that's the business. So like those purchases get to count as a business purchases generally, so that helps to ease the sting a little bit too. That can be a dangerous thing to to
No,
remember
definitely.
sometimes. You're like, oh, it's a tax write-off. I can buy a bunch of them, and then before you know it, you get carried away.
Yep. Oh yeah. I got so many business owners that they're gun tax write-offs. Let's let their CPA worry about that. But
That's right.
yeah,
Hey,
it gets
as
pretty
long as
wild.
they're buying them, hey, they can figure out how to justify it, can't
That's
they?
right. That's right.
That's the security system or something. That's
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
That's very cool. So yeah, so do you think you do more volume from the knife side of things? Do you do more volume, I'm guessing, online, or is it not?
Yes, but we continue to see an uptick in the stores, particularly in the Houston area. Part of the hard thing about it with any business, I mean, it's getting your name out there and getting people to know who you are.
Yep.
Um, whether you look on the gun side or the knife side, I mean, we're still small in the big scheme of things, and
Yeah.
we do that in a way on purpose. We prefer to the kind of boutique feel, right?
Yeah.
So I would say ultimately, when I look at the numbers, yeah, we're doing more online, um, and it's just because more people will seek us out. If there's a drop, like I remember when we got our first batch of Dixons in, I think at Blade Show last year, or maybe right after, y'all had a little bit that made it into the dealer line, and
Hmm.
people found them. That was one of those where I didn't have to go out and necessarily. Once I got them onto the site, they just disappeared.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of the volume in the store, um, it's hard. We're probably selling three, 2 to 3 online for every one we get in store. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying brand for brand. I'm saying we might
Sure.
sell a basic something in the shop for every 2 higher end or semi
Yeah.
customs that we sell online. So
It makes sense. That's kind of what I expected you to say, and what I'm really curious to see is over the next few years with this getting into kind of on topic, but maybe a little bit of a rabbit hole. So I think, and I've heard other people say it, I think that as AI becomes more prominent and stuff, I can already feel it myself. Like you go on social media, you go online, like it doesn't take long to get fed up with scrolling through social media. You're like, because you look, oh, that's cool, and then you realize, oh, that's AI, and so it's like, ugh, like stroll past it. Not that some AI stuff isn't cool, but like it's just watering it down so much that I feel like people are going to start that, and just technology has been taking over more and more and more of our lives. And obviously, online shopping. Most people do the majority of their shopping, I would say, online, especially for stuff like knives and stuff. But just because typically they don't have access to, you know, everything that they're interested in locally, or in a brick and mortar store. So I think that the trend is going to start to be, as things become more and more, less social, like less actual personal interaction, that people are going to start to seek that out more. And I think you're going to start to see some trends with some of the brick and mortar stores. Will it ever actually like do more than online? Probably not. But I do think that I feel like there's a real good possibility that things are going to start to trend more back towards people being able to have a human touch, being able to go in and actually talk to a salesperson, or a person in the store that's knowledgeable and can show them the product and compare stuff and just have that personal interaction. Because I mean, we're built to operate that way. We're not built to operate from behind a screen and not have actual one-on-one interaction with people. So I think as that becomes more rare, people are going to start to seek it out more. So I feel like you're getting in a really good position with your building up your brick and mortars, that's going to become even more important in the next few years.
I think so. It's one of those things where, again, specifics to the gun side. Um, when I think back when we started that, it was one of those where you had to come. I mean, and you still do. You have to come in to buy a gun. I mean, you have to come in to do
Right.
a background check. You got to do those things. So we at least have an opportunity to see every customer. Now, there's some, the WalMarts of the gun world who are trying to turn it into more of a transactional thing. And
Yeah.
when I compare our two locations, Lafayette's a smaller community. It's more of it feels more tight knit just because it's smaller. That's not to
Yeah.
say that Katy or Houston is completely different, but it's a different clientele, and it's a little more transactional there. until you really kind of dig in with those customers. So I'm with you there. We use, or I use AI sparingly. I mean, we have to kind of use it to kind of help move the ball along
Sure.
versus hiring, three or four or five guys to help write descriptions and do this and do that. But
Yeah.
it does you got to kind of keep that genie in the bottle, because if you just throw it out there and you build your website with nothing but technology and you kind of just let it go, you're going to end up in a spot where, I mean, I had this happen the other day. I pulled up a description on a product we'd gotten in, and it just produced its own description for me automatically. Well, I went in and read it, and it was completely wrong steel, wrong blade,
Yeah.
wrong everything. And I'm like, man, if I wasn't really paying attention to that, that's going to not get us traction. But where that kind of scares me is, AI. My understanding, at least, is that AI, it's going out and searching the web to find the information, right?
Right.
So eventually, if everybody has the wrong information, even if it's AI produced, suddenly
Right.
we're all looking at the wrong details and the wrong information
Yeah.
to get with. So um, I don't know. We'll see where all that goes, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you kind of have to keep a lid on it. But to stay relevant, you have to use it, or
Yep.
else you have to have a budget to bring in a ton of people, which is a challenge in and of itself.
Well, and when it comes down to running a business, like at this point, like I think we've already crossed the point of no return with it, because like if you yes, you could do that. You could go that route, say, okay, I'm going to hire people to, to do my copywriting and to do the different stuff, but you're you're not going to be able to sustain that because all your competitors are going to be using AI. They're going to have, which is going to give them a lot better profit margins, and they're basically going to put you out of business. Once the genie was out of the bottle, like you said, like there's no going back, because you either have to do it, or you can't compete. I think the trick is going to be to find ways to use it to enhance the personal experience for people, and maybe cut out some of the crappy busy work and stuff that can free your time up to then be more, interacting with people and stuff like that. I think there's definitely a place for it, but we're kind of stuck as business owners with having to use it at least some, or else you know you're not going to be able to compete, and you won't stay in business too long. So that's
Yeah.
just just the world we live in at this point. Kind of like that, you know, at some point there were people that were fighting. Lord, there still are people that you know fight being on the internet, having a website. You know what I mean? Like when the internet came
That's true.
along, people fought it, resisted it, or whatever, and most of them are not still around. So
Right.
you got to adapt to as the world changes, but whether it's for the better or the worse, unfortunately.
Well, and to get back to your kind of your original question there, like there's something about standing in one of my lobby of my Lafayette store, my Katie store, and a guy comes in and he just kind of looks dumbfounded, and he's like,
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of this stuff before in real life, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like you put something in their hands that they've never held before, they've never picked up a McNeese knives, or they may not even necessarily know the brand in depth, but they've heard of them, and to be
Right.
able to put them in and say, look, check this out, and to give them that touch and feel. No, not everybody walks out and says, I'm gonna drop 10 grand today on stuff, but you've planted the seed and given them the opportunity to see something that otherwise they may never get their hands on. And
That's right.
I love selling online and having customers online, and the challenge there for me is I don't get to see that reaction. I don't get to do that. So
Yep.
how do I deliver that same experience to that customer? So we throw little extras in the box and do this and that and try to really connect with the person that it's totally different than that person standing there in front of you.
Yep.
But it's equally important. You want that customer to feel that relationship, and you want them to appreciate that. Hey, I'm putting my money out here to give you access to this product that I love. I think you're gonna love. Let's do this.
Yep. Yep. I agree. That's always the challenge for us too. And that's the shows are where we get to experience that and actually, let people handle stuff in person and see their reaction in person. Man, I've talked about it before on here, but like it's always shows are exhausting. I mean, it goes back to our in the very beginning we're talking about, work versus, fun, but shows are extremely fun. They're definitely work, but I always get like a huge energy boost from shows just from all the feedback in person that we get because it's it's great to get feedback online and stuff. But when you actually get to see the expression on people's faces, hear the all the inflection in their voice and they're telling you their stories about their knife or are they getting to see it for the first time or whatever. Like it's and sometimes it's feedback that's something we need to change or whatever, and that's always helpful to be able to absorb all that feedback. And that's sometimes I wish we could have a storefront too, but we'd probably get about one customer every 6 months out here where we're where we're at.
Sure.
Um but so it's definitely not doable, but I love the feeling of being able to actually be out there and press the flesh with people and actually shake their hands, look them in the eye, and all that. I'm kind of envious that you get to do that on a regular basis because that's one of the really fun parts of our job when we get to go do shows. So that's really
It
cool.
makes a lot of that other crap tolerable.
Yeah,
all the other stuff that comes with it. It's like you get to enjoy that experience with the customer, and it's kind of like first time every time kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, so yeah.
that's cool. And I would be willing to bet now that you're talking about it that probably a lot of the customers that come to the online side kind of already have an idea what they're looking for and they're not just totally blindly. They're probably browsing, but they're not as blindly browsing. Whereas I'm sure you have people walk in the store, whether it be from the gun side of things and they venture over to the knives or whatever, that really just stumble, kind of literally stumble across them and then opens their eyes. So that's really cool. People that wouldn't just go searching out, you know, wouldn't even know what to search for if they went online to try to look at something. Like they would just search for knives and who knows what they might find. But that I think that's really cool. I've always tried to make sure that we did business with plenty of brick and mortar stores because it's just such a huge difference being able to actually get the product in people's hands because I would like to think that we're one of the brands that people see in pictures and stuff, and then they get them in hand and they're like even more impressed because it goes both ways. Because there's people that are really good at making stuff look good on pictures and videos, and then you see it in hand and it's not as impressive, or you feel the action or whatever it may be. So that's always refreshing when people actually they've actually handled them. They're not just oohing and ahhing over a picture or a video, and then they're actually putting them in their hands, and then they're still like them or whatever. That's always refreshing.
No, absolutely. It's I enjoy it when somebody will come in and again they'll come in the first time and like put their hands on something that they hadn't touched before and a couple days or a week go by and sometimes they just come back and buy it, but sometimes they show up with this little pile of you know knives that they're like, what do you give me for these? We do trades and stuff like that. What do you give me
Okay.
for these to get me into one of these?
Yeah.
And you know I will say, don't open the floodgate, but sometimes I give a little extra on knives that I otherwise wouldn't necessarily even carry in the store,
Right.
just to kind of help get that guy locked in on something better. And then we'll go liquidate those somewhere else. But
Right.
it is kind of nice to help. I say help to see somebody kind of evolving and recognizing why, you know, 10 knives worth nothing, versus one knife of high quality.
Yep.
It's a world of difference. So, and I think
Yep.
you and I even talked about it before once too. It's like when you compare, to the gun guy, right? Like the gun
Yep.
guy sometimes is that one that, and he comes in and he's got the decked out rifle, and he's got $10,000 in the gun, and he's got a $25 knife on his pocket, and you're like, man, do you not see the parallel between these two
Right.
things? Like,
It
you
drives me
appreciate quality
crazy.
here.
Yeah, it drives me crazy, and I see it, especially online all the time. It's like you said, they'll have $10,000 wrapped up in a rifle. They'll have a five, six, $7,000 pistol set up. They'll have probably two, three, $4,000 worth of web gear and nylon and stuff like all the stuff, and then they're carrying like you said, a $25 folder in their pocket. It's like, dude, that's part of your gear. That's part of your kit. Why are you not? I think I told you, to basically, I like to kind of almost shame them a little bit and be like, dude, you're carrying, you got $20,000 worth of other stuff, and you're carrying you've got the this, name brand this, name brand that, and you're carrying the equivalent of a High Point in your pocket for a knife. Like, come on, man.
That's right.
Like, you can do better than that. But
Do
it
better.
is weird. Like they just people that are like into guns, and it's kind of some really hardcore knife guys is the same way too. Though, like they won't blink an eye at spending $1,000 on a knife, but they think that a $500 pistol is too expensive. So, but
Yep.
I feel like gun guys are kind of worse about it. They're just so focused on guns and all the accessories and all the stuff, and then for some reason they just like there's like a disconnect there when it comes to the knives, and they just they're not seeing it as part of an extension of their gear, when in reality it's probably the one piece of gear that they're probably going to actually be more likely to use than anything else. Not necessarily in a, hand to hand knife fight kind of situation, but like,
Right.
you know, in some kind of utilitarian fashion, if you're, even if you're walking around all kitted up and stuff, I mean, what's more likely that you're going to get in a gunfight that day or that you're going to need to cut a piece of rope or, something like that? I mean, it's,
Or even the tactical piece of mail that comes in, right? Like,
there you
yeah,
go.
you
Yeah.
yeah,
To
you're gonna
open up
use a
the
knife.
package,
That's
open up the
right.
package for all the new expensive gun gear that you bought.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I tend to
yeah.
find like, that guy, and that's where for us, it is two different customers, but there's overlap and there's a fair amount. And, I don't know, I try to bridge that gap for them. And usually if that gun guy finds that one knife that he's that he connects with, right? Whether it
Hmm.
be a fixed blade or a folder or an auto or whatever it might be, it's almost like that gateway. Like it kind of opens the door a little bit to say, okay, now I can appreciate the quality. It's just like a watch guy or whoever else, right?
Yeah.
Once you actually recognize, because if I tell you, man, yeah, that Rolex right there is $10,000, I'm gonna look at it and go, what? Why am I spending $10,000? But the guy who's into
Yeah.
that can tell you every single reason why it's worth that, down to the smallest cog in that thing. And
Right.
it's the same thing with a knife guy, with a gun guy. Once you lock into that as a hobby or as a passion, um, common sense when it comes to money goes out the window, I guess.
It does kind of seem to. You would think that, you know, I think I probably see it a little more as a somebody actually making stuff and not just collecting stuff, knowing like I'll be honest with you, sometimes I look at stuff and I'm talking about even sometimes like super cheap, like just little whatever, like daily little things that you might buy, and I look at it and I'm like, how are they possibly selling this for $2? Like how does it make sense that like just to have somebody put it in the package seems like it would cost enough to where they couldn't sell it for $2? You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking along the terms of what all goes into it, and some of the stuff it amazes me that it can even sell for that price. So, but then when I'm looking at other more like premium stuff, when I'm looking at watches and guns and cars and things like that, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that it's that price because I can't imagine, and I don't always know all the details about what goes into it, but I can imagine that, I got a rough idea, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I can. It makes sense to me that it costs that much. Now, does that mean that I'm going to be willing to spend my money on it? Not necessarily. I might would rather spend that, like I said, that $10,000 Rolex. I would rather spend that $10,000 on guns or knives. But
Right.
that's and the Rolex guy would rather spend it on, Rolex. But it doesn't mean you can't appreciate what the other stuff is. And like you said, sometimes it's just a matter of kind of getting that slight little crack in their thinking of like, they like it, but it's like, that's awfully expensive. And then they start to understand more about it. And that's honestly part of the reason that we try to show as much of the behind the scenes and kind of tell our story and stuff as much as we do so that people actually see more of what goes into stuff and understand so that it's not just some, random assembly line product that they're like, you don't even stop and think about how it was made or what went into it or who's the craftsman that was behind it, that kind of stuff. So I think that's a very important part of it is telling the story of what goes into it because that it makes a world of difference on people understanding the value of it.
We always kind of lead in when somebody comes in and they're coming in new to something, right? And they
Hmm.
go, "Why does that cost that much?" Usually, the first thing that I bring up, I say, "Well, aside from the premium materials, aside from the quality that goes into this. You're paying for a person's time. Like,
Hmm.
you only have so much time on this earth, and that person dedicated their time and effort to making this as close to perfection as they can. Nothing's ever perfect in life, but they
Right.
put their time, their effort, their energy. They learned the skill, they learned the trade, they perfected their craft, and there's an intrinsic value there that you're never going to be able to, like, if you just take all the parts and
Right.
take them apart, you're never going to be able to work it backwards. Like, there's a value there
Right.
that you can't quantify, but it's equally important when you're buying something like that.
Yeah. People leave out the experience factor, and like they're like, oh, even if so you factor in the materials, and then even if, and that's where a lot of people want to end it. They're like, oh, a piece of titanium costs X amount, and a piece of steel costs X amount. Why does this not cost $15 more than that? If you
Right.
charge more than that, you're being greedy. Well, number one, there's way more that goes into it than that. You've got to have all the machines, you got to have the people, you got to have whatever. But they also completely leave out the fact that, okay, yeah, those parts, those raw materials may have cost X amount, but what does it cost to get to the point where you have the knowledge and the skill set to be able to take those raw materials and turn them into the finished product? Like, because I know for me, it's been getting close to 20 years worth of work and learning my craft. Like, what's that worth? What's 20 years of somebody's life worth to try to, certainly not, my craft is not perfected, but it's certainly better than it was 20 years ago. What is that worth that somebody is? And it's the same thing when you go hire a plumber to come to your house and fix a leak. They may come in there and, it may be 5 minutes worth of work to fix up, use a $2 part and fix it. But I guarantee you they're not charging you, $20 to do it. Like,
Right.
because that guy's time is worth something. So that's,
Exactly.
you have to factor that in, and most people do not have the thought process to do that.
Yeah. Until
But
they get deep into it, right?
yeah, 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 and then even then, some of them don't. I mean, one of the things that frustrates me more than anything is people that like get mad about the price of stuff or whatever, or just won't feel the need to chime in and, oh, it's overpriced or whatever. Well, it's is some stuff overpriced? I'm sure it is. But the reality is, if stuff is actually overpriced, it won't stay that way because they won't sell it. What determines whether something is worth the price it is whether people buy it or not. If something is truly overpriced, it's not going to stay on the market because whoever's selling it won't be able to sell enough of them to stay viable. So the market is going to dictate whether something is worth what they're charging for it. What it comes down to is it's not worth that to you, to whoever the person is saying, oh, that's overpriced. Well, you know, there's tons of super nice things out there that I like, that I'm a fan of. Like I said, back to the Rolex. I mean, I think Rolexes are cool. Excuse me, are cool, but I have not fallen in love with one enough yet to be able to convince myself to part with $10,000 for one. Like,
That's right.
that's
Yeah.
just, I've got, that does not mean I think it's overpriced. It just means it's more than I'm willing to pay for that thing. I think it's cool. It's worth that amount, but just not to me. But like, people
That's
can't grasp that. And I think it comes a lot from frustration. Like, they want to be able to buy stuff and they know they can't afford it. And so they get frustrated and then they're like, oh, it's overpriced. Well, no, you just need to make more money, dude. Like, sorry, but like, that's life. Like, if I want to go buy a super nice truck or whatever and I don't have the money to do it, I'm not going to go to the dealership and sit down and throw a fit and say your truck's overpriced because I can't afford it. I'm going to make more money until I can afford it, or I'll never buy it. One of the two,
true.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So, all right, guys. So those of you paying attention and actually watching the podcast, you're going to notice that suddenly I teleported to a different background. Had some technical issues. I had to move locations. So we're back. So just for those of you that are astute and notice that's what happened. I apologize. But all right. So something that came to mind, Tyler, while you were talking earlier about people coming in the store and stuff. I know you had to have seen it, and probably most everybody out there has seen it. There's this old video that goes around, and it comes back around pretty often, of the guy going into like a gun shop, and he's looking at knives, and he asks the guy, he's like, can I snap it? And then he starts doing all these ninja moves. Hey, have
Yes.
you ever
Yes.
seen anything similar to that coming in your store? Because that is hilarious.
Yeah, so we have, you get on both sides of the coin, and you've got your experts. We'll call them experts on both sides. And look,
Yeah.
I'll start by saying we love all our customers. But at the end of the day, sometimes policies get written for things that happen and you witness.
Yep.
I've had a handful of guys. Uh, End up leaving with some nice wounds. We got to keep a nice box of band-aids at the front, particularly on autos.
Oh yeah.
We got a few that come out with some force, and if somebody's not prepared, even when we show them, we say, look, when you hit this button, the magic's going to happen. Like, make sure you don't have body parts nearby. There have been a few times. So we do have a little sign up in the lobby that basically says, caution, these knives are very sharp, enter at your own risk, And then on the other side of that, behind the counter, on the gun side, we got a nice little jug, or now it's literally like a big jar full of bullets for guns that were unloaded when they walked in the door, right? They were already cleared.
Yeah.
That's the one that always kind of gets me, is the guy comes in and says, I know it's unloaded, and of course it's never unloaded.
Yeah. That's
So
the really scary one there. Yeah.
yeah, we've gotten pretty good. My guys that work for me, they're all pretty quick on that. I mean, we're our both stores, the Lafayette stores is now the bigger store. We just moved, and we're at about 4,500 square feet. But we have somebody close enough to the front that if a gun walks in the front door, we're usually taking it from the customer and doing a safety check on it pretty quick. And
Yeah.
um, but we've definitely seen our fair share of not only that, we'll get guns in for consignment, cleanings, and whatever else. And you're like, man, I just wish this guy had come in and asked us how to put this together before he bought these parts on Amazon, and like completely just, built this thing. Because to be quite frank, like sometimes some of these parts that guys will get, and we got a gunsmith on staff, and he also has a background in knife sharpening, not knife making, but just kind of
Yeah.
maintenance and sharpening. And we'll have customers come in, and sometimes we have to say, look, I'm sorry, we can't work on this because I'm not going to put my name behind it. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say that we assembled these parts into this thing for you, and then you go out and tell people that you got this from us, because it, we just can't. I don't
I
want
get
my
it.
reputation to be that. So
Yep. I get it. That's kind of how we fall with some of the mod work and stuff out there. Like, there's some guys out there that do really good work, but like,
right,
it's some of it's obvious, but not all of it is, and definitely not to every customer. So like, you know, the secondary market is obviously a real thing, and so these knives change hands sometimes. Lord, sometimes 10, 12 times, and or more, and like somebody gets it and they don't know what has been, you know, number one, maybe the person who sold it didn't, or maybe three or four people removed from the person that had it modded, and then that information didn't pass down all the way, and then this person doesn't know, what came from the factory and what didn't, and stuff like that. And even besides the actual modders, the one that really kills me is people that they'll get them and they'll make little tweaks to them, little adjustments to them. They'll change this or
sure,
change that, and then they'll sell them like new, new in the box to the next person. Well, you're leaving out the fact that you tweaked the lock bar, or you did this or you did that, and the next person gets it and it's like, oh, this doesn't feel like the D10 on my other McNeese knives, or this doesn't feel like everybody else said theirs does. Well, yeah, because it's not the way it left the factory. Like
yeah,
but it's very difficult to prove that unless saw the person talking about it. Like, it can be hard to get down to the to know, okay, well, did we leave this lock bar too weak going out of the shop, or and sure, at times we make mistakes, but like there's times when it's obvious, but it's the ones that are not obvious that's really frustrating, because it's like, you know if we knew for sure that it had been messed with, it'd be one thing, but like, look, this isn't a warranty issue. This is somebody has, whether it be some slight little tweak that they did, and maybe they didn't remove any material or whatever, but somebody tweaked something, like, it's been modified from the original factory condition. So like, we'll fix it for you, but like, just know, and man, and I know it happens because we even have people like in our Facebook group. I had to kind of scold somebody the other day because they were like, "Oh yeah, I always do this, tweak this on the lock bar or whatever when I get it." I'm like, "No," I was like, "I do not recommend that." Like, and you may do it fine every time and get it just the way you like it and whatever, but like somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, they tweak it this way a little bit, and oh no, it's too much. Back the other way, up too little, and then before you know it, you snap your lock bar off. And so
Right.
like, because that can very easily happen. But what's more frustrating for us is the, like I said, that kind of stuff being done to it, and then you can't, you know, people get the next person down the line gets it, has no idea that the person prior tweaked it, and all of a sudden we're getting blamed for stuff, you know, that, oh, they got bad QC or whatever. Well, no, we can't QC everything a customer does once they get the knife, because a lot of them do a lot of stuff, unfortunately. So anyway, yeah,
We
I can totally feel you on that. That's frustrating.
we see that with the used knife side,
I
and
bet.
used gun side, and it's like you got to be real careful, because again, same thing. We're putting our name on it. Once it comes into our case, no matter what happened to it before it got there, once I
Yeah,
sell it, I own it. You know, I own
that's right.
that customer experience. And yeah, there's been plenty we've turned away. We do take in knives sometimes from folks that aren't local. They'll contact us on the web, and actually
Yeah,
had a knife come in recently that was supposed to be a really high end Damascus, da 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 da, well known maker, and it I had three variations of that same knife sitting there. Otherwise, I may not have caught that it was a clone,
hmm,
because it looked that good at first until you compared it side by side with the same knife from the same maker,
yep,
maybe with a slightly different finish, but yeah. So it's a delicate line there, and I can only imagine as the maker, that customer calling you and saying this knife's a piece of junk, and you get it in and you're like, that's that started off as my baby, but it ain't my baby no more.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very frustrating, and like I said, the ones that are where it's just little slight stuff that's not super obvious is you know, the real kicker. It's like, you know, it's hard to even prove other than just having the confidence in my team that it didn't go out like that. You know, to be able to say definitively, this lock bar was stronger than this when we sent it out. Like, there's not really a way to measure that, so it's like, you know, but we can usually tell because we've got pretty rigid standards, and it's some of the stuff is by feel, but like it's you can get it in and it's just you can just tell it's just not right or whatever. But that doesn't bother me as much as all the ones out there that I feel like that people see or they handle or whatever, and they've been changed from their original. They don't have the factory settings anymore, and they're handling them and they're just assuming that whatever's been done to them is the way that they all feel, and like then they may never even give our knives another look. They may just never be like, well, that I didn't like the D10 on that, or I didn't like this, or I didn't like that, and then because that person be kind of like somebody you know getting in a new vehicle and not understanding that the seats can be adjusted and the steering wheel can be adjusted and all that, and they sit down and like, oh no, this fits me horribly, I can't drive this is uncomfortable. Not realizing
Yeah.
that somebody has modified the seat position or the steering wheel position or whatever, and like then they never want to look at that particular vehicle again because they're super uncomfortable. So like yeah, it's
I
frustrating,
went
but
I went through that. This would have been like 2008, somewhere in there. I bought, you know, Facebook groups trading, swapping knives, and I got a higher end knife, from a well known maker. It's the first one I'd ever had, and I didn't realize at the time, I was naive to it, that it had been slightly modified to this other person's specifications. And it was 5 years before I put my hands on another one of their knives, because I just thought, man, they just make a crappy product.
yep,
And turned out the product was just that one knife that somebody else had turned into what I had
yep.
my hands on. So I can say firsthand, I know how that goes.
Yep, it happens, and it happens unfortunately way too frequently, and there's no way to know. It's not like we can preemptively or like we can't know. Hey, dude, that knife that you looked at. I mean, we never see it. Those people a lot of
Right.
times just they don't ever give the. And it's not just us, obviously. Like they never give the company another look because they tried one that whatever they didn't like about it was potentially not even something that we did, and then they just move along. So, and honestly, a lot of that could be avoided if people would just be, if we had a little better integrity in a lot of the, especially in the secondary market. Like you get a lot of people that are, I've harped on it here before too on our podcast about, everybody and his brother, every knife you look at, it seems like just about as a brand new in box, never carried or whatever. Well, yeah, but how many times did you flip it open? 3,000? Like, dude, that's a
Right.
used knife. Like, that knife has use on it. The edge may not have cut anything, but that is not a brand new out of the box knife. And then you couple that in with, I tweaked this or I tweaked that or I whatever, like, it, and then people just aren't honest about, what they're just worried about selling the knife and getting as much out of it as they can. And so they leave stuff out and all that. So a little more integrity would be would be fantastic, but
We
that's probably
appreciate
true
it,
of the
though.
whole society in general. So
Right.
we probably won't solve that on
At
this
least not today.
podcast.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
All right. So tell me, kind of working towards closing here. Tell me what you see from your experience, the last few years and going forward. Where do you think the knife industry is at the moment, and where do you kind of see it going?
Sure. So, that's it's a challenge for us because again, we're continuing to grow in terms of the national side of it, but from a regional standpoint, at least, I can tell you, um, you know, everybody went big, everybody wanted big for a little while, and now they've all, at least what we're seeing, they want smaller. We've seen a lot of popularity along the small fixed blades, like the small EDC stuff.
Yep.
For a long time, everybody was asking us again for bigger knives, but then it seems like lately the trend's been to a little bit smaller. A 3-inch blade or something in that range has been pretty popular. I think when you look at the economy and kind of where we're at now, there's always a place for the true high end customs. That kind of buyer is still always going to be there, but your average consumer right now is looking a lot closer at that purchase where you know 2 years ago they might have bought a new knife every month or 2 months or whatever it might be. It might be 4 months or 6 months in between purchases. So I think, at least from what we're seeing, consumers are being a little bit more um, they're being a little bit more conscious of who they're buying and what they're buying. So, you know, keeping with, for us, the higher quality brands that kind of meet, what we want to put out there as quality, and being able to kind of maintain that level. Um, I think that we'll continue to see that trend, at least in terms of customers that spend the money are spending on the better quality items. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all that. I think we've touched on it here before, but I mean, there's no doubt everybody I've talked to, all the other dealers, all the other makers, companies, not even just knives, but in the EDC in general, for the most part, like the industry, the market has been down for a little while now, and I think that's mostly indicative of the overall economy because the economy's not doing as good, and as much as I was hoping by now it was going to be showing a lot of signs of improvement, it's not improved the way I think anybody wanted it to so far. So that I mean, it's trickled down, especially when you're dealing with, like you said, these are not, while knives technically in their purest form, yes, is a utilitarian item, but we're not really selling utilitarian versions of this stuff. So it's kind of really, people are, it's more, uh, a want than a need in almost all cases for the stuff that we're making and that you're selling. It's so people just aren't, they're not either not able or just not willing to spend, like I said, things are tighter, so everything else is costing them more. So they're not just going to as freely spend money on something that's just a want versus a need. That's just, that's economics. I mean, it's going to
yeah.
happen.
And we've seen, we constantly try to adapt and make, figure out, okay, where's the consumer, right? And so for us, we have seen more emphasis on that. Let's do a trade plus cash, or let's do, 2 for 1 or something like that, which
Hmm.
for us is good, and it helps us to be able to kind of keep that flow going. It's more work, right? I tell my staff all the time, it's like, the customers are still there. It's just how much do you have to work for them?
Yeah.
During COVID, during that period of time, all you had to do was just like wave your hand up in the air and say, I got a product to sell.
Yeah.
And it was gone by the end of the day. We all enjoyed that. But uh, there's always an ebb after that flow, and we're kind of still working through that valley. Now, that
Yeah.
said, overall, I see my gun shop sales down a little bit. We're not way off, but luckily for me, kind of bringing the knife thing on last year, I'm like, everything's just trending up because to go from zero to anything is a win, right?
Yeah. That's right.
so so it kind of works in our favor there, and it kind of keeps my guys' spirits up. Even if we see some drop off on some other categories,
Yep.
um, it's a great feeling to turn around and say, okay, hey, we're seeing positive trends. So the efforts my guys are putting into place, the conversations they're having, taking the time to really learn the products is nice. And I'm lucky because most of the guys that work for me, like, if they could afford it, they would just let me pay them in knives and guns and accessories. So it's nice to see that, that enthusiasm, that excitement the customer has is still there. It's just whether or not the money follows. We just got to give that
Right.
a little bit more room, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I don't think it's that we've had a bunch of people become disenfranchised with knife collecting or anything like that. I think it's mostly just the economy in general. I do think that the flood of knives that are on the market right now has affected it some. I think some
Sure.
people are getting a little, it's just gotten so watered down. And of course, when I say that, a lot of the ones, all of the, I would say the American companies are not as bad about it. We all have seen that the Chinese companies primarily are like they are putting out a gazillion different designs constantly, and most of them have two or three different sister companies under their umbrella. So you've got like this one company that's now three or four different companies, and every one of them is putting out. It's honestly like they're just got designers sitting down and like, okay, change a couple of lines here, change a couple of lines there, and just every design they can like just throwing everything at the wall as they can, and just to see what sticks. And like that has flooded the market so much that people get. And you already know this. I know that like sometimes when people are presented with too many choices, they just don't make a choice at all. Like
Sure.
they just get overwhelmed and they won't make a decision. So I think that the watering down of the market has definitely played into it some as well, and I think that's going to take some time to sort itself out and people to kind of be able to look through you know look through all the slop, if you want to call it that. And I'm not saying that because necessarily this stuff is bad, but it's just
Sure.
a lot of stuff,
It's a lot of
Um,
stuff in your face all at once. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and so just be able to kind of see through that and actually find the stuff that actually appeals to you and go from there. But I think it can probably be very overwhelming for a knife collector at this point if they, especially some of the newer ones that get into it and they don't really know the difference between A and B, and they just like there's so many choices. It's like it could be overwhelming for sure. But
I think you've got, you look at again, compare the COVID buyer to the buyer today, and we're 4.5, 5 years from that time frame, and all this stuff is cyclical to a certain degree. I've
yeah,
seen it in the time that we've been in the gun shop side of things, and I hadn't been here as long on the knife side, but I still feel like it rings true. When we get into the next high buying cycle, like nobody wants to hear, let's just wait a little longer, but that's kind of
yeah,
where it's at. And,
it
and the
is.
next round is probably going to be, it's going to be some of the same guys that were around, in the teens and the early 20s, but there's a new group of folks who've kind of come into their maturity, into their, we'll call it their adulting phase, um, that are going to be seeking out that quality made product. Um, and when they've got the money on, in their pocketbook that they can buy it, they're going to still buy the quality stuff. In the interim, we all sit here and go, okay, now how can we speed that along, right? How can we make
Yeah.
that happen tomorrow? But
Right.
I think being a solid company and producing a product that leads the marketplace, or for us being a retailer that we try to set a standard and hold ourselves to it, and provide a certain level of service. You know, when that guy's ready to come back and buy, I'm the only thing that I'm gonna kick myself for is if he doesn't come back to me at that time.
Right. That's right. So what you're saying is we may have to have a little bit of patience.
We're going to enjoy 25. We're going to see how this year goes,
Yeah.
and wait, what year are we in? 26.
26
I don't
now.
even know. Living in the past, man. It's
Yeah.
almost, yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's what you got when you got, 8 and 9 year old kids. It's,
Yeah.
I can't even remember what day it is
Hey,
sometimes,
I,
but
I hear
yeah,
you.
I think we got a little bit longer to go through that. And we went through that again on the gun side. In that world, when people aren't afraid that they're going to lose their rights, I hate to be that this is the way the industry works.
Yeah.
I didn't know this before I got into it, but the reality is, people, unfortunately, in that world on the gun side, you've got your regular, like, I want the coolest, latest stuff, but then you've got the fear buyer.
Yeah.
And I don't look forward to the fear buyer because it usually means something bad's happening in the
Right.
general world, but it also is the time that, in that market, guns sell. Now, I think knives, it's not the same, it's not the same
A little
beast, but
different. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, like, we kind of just have to ride it out,
Yeah.
give them a little bit more time until that next wave comes along. So,
Yeah. Yeah. The political landscape definitely affects the gun world way more than it does the knife world. I think there's I mean, if it got to the point that they started getting crazy enough talking about banning knives and stuff, I guess it would have the same effect. But I would just as soon not, even though it might help us temporarily sell more knives, I would rather not go down that road. So
no, definitely not. Definitely not.
I'll be patient and take what we've got now over that. So one last thing I wanted to touch on before that, just because a couple of things you said have reminded me of it. You mentioned about kind of being a boutique shop, and you're talking about sticking with the higher premium brands and stuff like that. That's something, man, that I think a lot of people, especially for us as a manufacturer, a lot of people don't get that. Like they're like, oh, you should come out with a budget line, do this or that, and like you can reach more customers. And I'm like, I'm not trying to reach every customer. Like I'm not
Sure.
trying to sell a knife to every person out there that likes knives. I'm trying to sell knives to the people that want a premium product, that's made in the US, that's well built, everything that goes into being a premium product. I mean, I'm not trying to, there's companies out there that are servicing the market for people in the market for a $10 to $50 knife and a $50 to $200 knife and whatever. Like that's not the market that we're trying to hit. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of a good comparison. Like I don't want to be like overinflate us, but like for example, Ferrari or Lamborghini, like something that we might aspire to be that in the knife world. I'm not saying that we are yet, but like they're not worried about people buying, $20,000 Hondas. Like they're
Right.
not worried about those customers. They're not like, oh, we got to come out with a $20,000, Lambo so that we can catch those customers. No, that's not who they are. That's not their brand. And all you ever do if you try to appeal to every customer is completely water your brand down, and you're going to have fewer customers in the long run because you've watered your brand down. You're not, and that would not be fair. Also, I don't feel like to the people that have invested in our brand over the years that they're buying the brand, like they associate themselves with a premium brand, and then we start putting out less than premium product, budget products. Well, then I feel like that kind of waters it down even for our customers that already have built entire collections around our brand and stuff. Like no, it's not technically affecting the value of those knives exactly that they already got, but still, the overall impression of the brand gets watered down if you have premium and budget and all that. Like we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're trying, which is what I get from you that you're trying to do on the retail side of it. Is you're looking for a specific kind of clientele. You're not trying to be Academy Sports or Walmart where people walk in and buy the cheapest gun that they can find. Like they're, you're looking for people that are looking for quality, looking for a certain level of product, and we're doing the same thing. We're trying to create a certain level of product, and that's the customers we're trying to appeal to. We're not trying to appeal to, the budget customers. That's not who we are. And so
Yeah.
people don't
So
a
we
lot
have.
of people don't understand that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut
Oh,
you
you're
off there,
good.
but I think it's the fun of the web here. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can tell you firsthand. I know I don't want to do that because I tried to do it. I
Mhm.
tried to do it for about a year. And if you ever make it down here, I'll show you the crap that's still in the store that never sold. That I thought I'm going to cover. I'm going to be a jack of all trades, right?
Yep.
But then master of none, right? So we tried a little bit of that. I said, okay, I'm going to get bigger into the outfitter. And just for people who don't know, I mean, we're the higher end custom slash, EDC slash, higher end rifles. Um, we will help anybody that comes in the door and we'll educate them and we'll do that part. But on the gun side, I have distributors where if they want that $350 gun and my guys talk to them and it is actually the right gun for them, we'll order it. But I'm
Right.
not putting it on my shelf. I'm not going to have it sitting on my shelf because I would, even if we spend the time to kind of tell them, why there are other options that are a better fit. If they don't want that, there is the academy down the street or the whoever else that's
Right.
what they specialize in is volume, right? And I thought for about a year in there, I said, oh man, we can get in here and we're going to do this and that and everything else. And then one day I said, well, wait a minute, I got all this junk here, and really what it boiled down to is my staff, myself included, if I'm not interested in it, I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to try to
Right.
sell it. It's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust because it doesn't fit the model of what gets us excited, right? If the
Yep.
product doesn't get me, excited and motivated, and my guys, you can see them, it's almost like they get their caffeine fix and get out there and just telling the
Yep.
customer more detail than sometimes they even want to know, but nonetheless, like really kind of filling them in. Like you don't get that way over, a 310 or $210 revolver. You just
Right.
don't. That's where the utilitarian thing comes in. That's where
Yep.
it's like the I'm getting this just for the safety of having a gun in the house
Yeah.
versus I've shot this. We look at it and say, okay, again, we'll help any customer that comes in the door, but we're looking for that guy who's on his second or third or 150th purchase, whatever it might be,
Right.
that has found what he likes and what he doesn't like, and now he's looking for guidance as to, I'm about to spend some serious cash on a gun, on a knife, on an optic, and I want to put my hands on it. I want to know that it is going to meet the need that I think it's going to need, because in this day and age, you can find all the information you want online, but what you can't do is actually touch it. You can't actually put
Yep.
your hand on it and know what it feels like. And so, for us, yeah, we've kind of come like the idea of staying that kind of boutique feeling was reinforced when I tried to stray a little bit and
Yeah.
found it didn't work. Now, the only exception for us, at least in the knife world, is we do have an in-house guy that does engravings for us. As a matter of fact,
Hmm.
like we make our own hat, all kinds of stuff. We make our own gear, but we do little engravings on knives, and so we kind of have, I'll call it a budget line for that, for the
Cool.
bachelor guy that comes in. But even then, I still have my standards. Like if it's
Yeah.
not something that if I had to close the whole thing tomorrow, if the stuff that's in the shop isn't something I'd want to take home with me, then it shouldn't be in the shop in the first place, is the way I look at it.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. It's just like you said, they're like for me personally, like unfortunately for my bank account, I like, nicer things. You know what I mean? I
Right.
don't typically, but now that being said, I've got cheaper guns. I've got cheaper knives. Again, like some of it's more utilitarian. Like I need something to throw in this glove box or this whatever. Like I'm not necessarily looking for the most expensive option or whatever. But for the most part, I have fairly expensive taste, which also means that I don't buy nearly as much stuff as I would like to because I'm not one that's going to go out. I'm not going to go out and buy 5 cheaper versions. I'd rather wait until I can buy the one more expensive version and get what I
Sure.
really want, because as a general rule, cool stuff ain't cheap and cheap stuff ain't cool. Like that's
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 right.
kind of a general rule. Now, yes, there's some that's not cut and dried. There are some things that are cheap that's still pretty cool, but as for the most part, you know, I feel like that rings true, at least for me. But yeah, it's but some people just don't quite grasp that. It's not that anybody doesn't mean well, but we've had multiple people over the years be like, oh, you should do a budget line, or you should do this, like, but that's not who we are. Like, again, that's like whoever, Lamborghini or Porsche or Mercedes or whoever. Like, we're not trying to compete with Hondas. Like, we're not trying to compete with daily driver, best bang for your buck, utilitarian stuff. Like, we're trying to come up with something that's 100% a usable tool, but is still cool and has all the premium features and all that with it too. And so some people get that, some people don't, but it's, and we're not writing anybody off. To be honest with you, a lot of those people that are buying the more budget line are eventually going to make their way to us or to comparable companies to us. We might not be their particular flavor, it might be somebody else, but most people do not, unless you got somebody that's just got like money to burn. Most people don't jump into knives or guns or anything else, like buying the highest end stuff right off the bat. So there's a ladder to climb there, and again, there's other people. We're not trying to compete with the people that are making the budget knives. They can sell them. They can help bring them up the ladder, and when they get to that point where they're ready for something that's in our category, then we'll welcome them with open arms, and
Yeah.
we're not gonna look down our nose at them in the meantime. I mean, I've got plenty of cheap knives and stuff. Like, I still occasionally buy a cheap knife. It's just, you know, not everybody is ready for that particular category at the same time. And so, and not every company, or whether it be a manufacturer or whether it be a retailer like you, necessarily needs to try to cater to the whole array of everything either, because again, you know you're kind of like you said, but same reason I like dedicated tools. Like, I'm not in the shop and stuff. I'm not a big fan of like, oh, this thing can do 15 different things. Like, well, yeah, but it probably doesn't do any of them very well. I want one tool that does the job great, and that's all I need it to do. I don't need it to do 5 other things. And so, as a company, I feel like that's kind of the route we take too. Like, we want to do what we do it really well. Other people can do the other stuff, and we'll stay in our lane, and people will find their way to us. And I think that's the smartest thing you can do. And it's the same thing with even like your social media brand or whatever. Like, if you can't accept right off the bat that not everybody's going to like you, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, then you're not going to make it. Like, you'll completely drive yourself crazy, and like, you won't, you know, that even knowing that, it's hard for me sometimes. Nobody likes to think that somebody doesn't like them. You know what I mean? But then you see people being super insulting and everything else, and it's like, dude, what did I ever do to you? Like, you know, but it's
Yeah.
fine. That's because
Yeah.
no matter what you do, the more you try to please everybody, the more you're not going to ever please everybody. So if you can just be yourself, whether that mean making the product that you make and doing the best at it that you can, selling the best product that you can, being the best retailer you can, or just being the best person that you can, and the people that are for you are going to find their way to you, and the other ones you don't worry about. And that's
Yeah,
that's how
that's
you don't drive
exactly right.
yourself crazy.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's like there's a place for that guy getting into the budget, the budget knife or whatever else, and or the budget gun, whatever it may be, and that may be where his interest stops. That
Yeah,
may be the last place that he wants to be, and good for him. He's happy with his product or her product, and that's where they end their experience because it's just a utilitarian item. But then there's the rest of us, the knife freaks, right? The guys
right.
who like we're passionate about it, and it builds over time, and suddenly, like we talked about early in this, it's like your frame of reference in terms of, okay, a $25 item used to be all I needed, but now I see why this is better, and this is better, and this is a better quality, and this is going to fill a need. And then we get to the point in our line where when we're dealing with like ultra premium stuff where you're talking about a collector grade or that kind of thing, I can't tell you how many people, whether their kids actually want them or not, say I'm buying this as an heirloom for my kids, right? Like they've
Yeah.
kind of gone all the way up the ladder to where now
Right.
they're buying, something that for your average Joe, like if if they went and told their friends how much they paid for it, they I don't know, may or may not want to actually share that information. But
Yeah. They'd either be
it's
super
that
impressed or they'd be super think you were completely crazy.
completely crazy. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's totally okay if a customer, if we're not the right shop for a customer, we're glad to
Right.
help them. And we want to encourage them if it's something that excites them. But I also, I'm not going to force somebody to come in, and I'm not going to try to force uh, you know, $800 knife down somebody's throat just because I think it's the best thing. It may have
Right.
no relevance in their life whatsoever. Um, but then again, 6 months or 8 months down the line, they've come full circle and they realize the value of what we told them about,
Yep.
and that's where that relationship really kind of becomes, something that we both can relate to. So
Yep. A lot of it just comes down to education, which to be honest with you is a lot of why we do this podcast, like to try to help further educate and show people behind the scenes and what goes into it and what, why it costs what it does and the whole works. So, and our
yeah,
philosophy behind stuff. So yeah, that's our big responsibility that I see for all of us, no matter what industry you're in, is to educate people. And then again, the ones that are drawn to you will be drawn to you, and they'll appreciate that you educated them. And some of them may appreciate that you educated them, but they may end up a customer of somebody else. But that's okay too, because
sure.
it's still helping the industry as a whole. So, but yeah, well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I greatly appreciate you coming on. I think this was a great conversation. I love talking more about I like talking technical stuff about knives, but the business side of stuff and business in general is always extremely interesting to me. And it helps give me perspective too, hearing, some of your end of it and stuff that really helps me out to know that, somebody else is seeing things similar to how I'm seeing them. Because I don't know about you, but I'm always second guessing myself and like, I think this is the
Sure.
way it is, but is this really what's going on? Or,
Hey,
so
if it's not, we'll just both ride off that cliff together, right?
well, there you go. Yep.
Yeah,
I ain't got any brakes. So
that's right. Well,
if the
no,
road
and I
runs out, I'm done. So, all
and
right.
I really appreciate you letting me come on here and talk with you. It means a lot that you reached out and said, "Hey, let's do this." So
Well,
I
I
definitely
appreciate it, man.
appreciate the opportunity.
You've always very very well spoken and have a lot of knowledge, like I said, about knives and about business in general. So that's a lot of what we're trying to look for. And I greatly appreciate your time. And guys, make sure you go tell them where they can find you if you would before we get off of here.
Sure. So you got two. Well, if you're in Louisiana or Texas, I don't care where you are. It's a big state, but you can find us Lafayette, Louisiana, or Katy, Texas. And then the websites for the gun side is CajunGun.com, and then for the knife business is CajunKnife.com. That's where we're hanging out. Also on socials and all that fun stuff too.
Easy enough. Yep, these guys they do a good job, guys. So make sure you check them out. As far as for our side of things, please make sure that you are subscribing, liking, leave us a review. That always helps. And please share the show out. Send it to somebody that you think might get something out of it, whether it's entertainment or just laughing at a crazy redneck running his mouth for an hour or so or whatever it may be. But you can also email us in questions or suggestions for topics to knifefreakshow.com. We always appreciate that because as much as I like to talk, believe it or not, sometimes I have a hard time coming up with topics to talk about. Sometimes all I need is one little spark and I can rant for an hour. But sometimes when you're on the spot, it's kind of hard to think about what the show's going to be about. So today was no problem because we had a great conversation. I appreciate that, Tyler, and you guys go check him out, and we will plan on seeing you next week. Hope y'all have a great
Appreciate it.
week.